This is the Bizgnus podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Starting in her kitchen, Kara Goldin turned her idea of an unsweetened flavored water into a business that now spans all 50 states and beyond. To do it, she had to invent a new product, link it to customers who didn't know they needed it, and more, including the challenge of doubters inside the beverage industry, as well as the doubts that bounce about the heads of every entrepreneur. Kara Goldin, inventor of the Hint flavored water brand, joins us on this Bizgnus podcast. Kara, let's start by telling our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your background. How did you end up selling water?
Well, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never thought that I was going to start a company or that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And for me, I sort of grown up in either media or tech prior to founding Hint. My father was kind of a frustrated entrepreneur. Had launched a brand within a large company meaning ConAgra, and he had launched a brand called Healthy Choice. But still, I didn't think, okay, one day I'm going to go start my company. But that's when, after leaving AOL, I started looking at my own health. And I thought, well, I'm taking a break. I had 3 kids at the time. I now have 4. It's like a good time to get healthy and really start paying attention to what I'm putting in my body. And that's when I, recognized that I was drinking too much diet soda, not even regular soda, but diet soda. And when I gave up drinking diet soda and started drinking plain water, I thought, okay, this definitely does the trick for my health, but it's so darn boring. I think I'm going to end up going back to drinking diet soda if I don't figure this out. And that's when one day I came up with the idea when I saw a bunch of fruit sitting in my kitchen in a bowl. And I thought, wonder if I slice that fruit up and throw it into the water, if that will just give me a little bit of taste. And it did. And that's when I started searching for a product like Hint in stores, and was shocked to see that things that we're calling that had fruit, and some of them had fruit and coloring and water, they all had either sugar or diet sweeteners in it. And I didn't want that because I had sort of gone that route before. And that's when I decided I need to just go create this product.
Well, there's one thing to create a nice little thing in your kitchen for your family and friends, but now you are selling this stuff in 50 states and who knows where else. How did you get to this point, and what was the toughest thing to overcome?
So I started. It was the truth. And it's, this company I started it 15 years ago. I had, the book is called Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. I had many doubts, kind of going back to what we were talking about just a minute ago of starting the company. I mean, I didn't even think this was a company when I was first starting. I really, viewed it as, wow, wouldn't it be really great if I could get a product in, my local Whole Foods that had just opened. And that's when a few friends said to me, that's so great that you started a company. And I said, wait, it's not a company. I've worked at companies. I've got my drink that I like drinking, and I'm trying to get it on the shelf in a store. And so I almost, denied that what I had started, primarily because I did have so many doubts. And the more that I talked about the fact that I, didn't have any experience in the beverage industry, I had no idea what I was doing, I was convincing myself that I really had no business being here, right? I don't know if you've ever done that before, but I always say now, and something I talk about in the book as well, is there's always plenty of people who will agree with you when you're doubting, including industry experts, right? They'll be sure to, say, oh yeah, that's right, this is a really dumb idea, you'll never be able to, ultimately do it. And that's when I really just decided, well, I'll just keep going and see what happens. And, it came at sort of a good time for me too, because I had young children that I wanted to be home with and spend some more time. But I figured if I just keep going and keep going, and maybe I'll make a little bit of progress. And that's when, I really realized that not only was I solving a problem for myself and for my family around, getting rid of these sweeteners and drinking things that I didn't even know, if they were that great for me. But also I started hearing from consumers day after day who were calling the number on my bottle or emailing me and saying, hey, you're helping me drink water. You're helping me control this disease called type 2 diabetes that I've recently got, or, even more recently, where people would come to us and let us know that Hint is helping mask the metallic taste that they get when they're going through chemo. So again, this started in my kitchen as my own crazy idea to sort of help me drink water, but pretty quickly I started realizing that there were a lot of other people out there who, had this challenge and had this problem. And this was a product for less than $2 a bottle that could help a lot of people. I mean, who wouldn't want to be doing that, right? I think people, that is a dream, to be able to help people and actually build something that really, people have an attachment to.
So, Kara, how did you get this out of your kitchen? I mean, you certainly didn't start bottling in your kitchen, did you?
I did. I was making it in my kitchen, figuring that it would eventually go out of my kitchen, right? But got to start somewhere. I mean, why not just start it in my kitchen and see what would happen? I mean, I didn't have relationships with people bottling the product or, distributors, and, and clearly I had plenty of doubts when I started realizing how much I didn't know. And that's when, I started asking questions like, why? Or another one was, what can we do? Right? Primarily because I just didn't have the background or the knowledge. And something I, share with so many entrepreneurs today is that, sometimes not having experience in an industry is actually the best thing, because you look at it with a, new lens, right? You're not sort of trained to think a certain way. And I think that clearly was my story, that, if you're in any industry, if you sort of grow up in it and, maybe you've got lots of experience, but you also don't know where your blind sides are, right? And, blinders, right? Where people are, over and over again, I kept thinking that, oh, I don't have enough experience, but actually so many stories along the way where I actually had, people right in front of me that were, I was going to give me advice, and they were like, no, that can't be done. Like we created the first water product with real fruit in it that didn't have preservatives in it. And I kept asking people so why do you need preservatives in the product? And, that there's juices out there, for example, like apple juice, where they weren't putting preservatives in their product. They were just, somehow filling it in a way that didn't need preservatives in it. And the number of bottlers that I talked to who said, well, just because. And, as my parents would say to me, that never was an answer that was good enough for Kara, just because. I was always like, why? But why? And so, it was natural for me to have that curiosity. And ultimately, that really helped me there were many bottlers who said, in so many words, go away. But there were a couple that actually said, I don't actually know the answer to that. Let me think about that for a minute. And then once I started that dialogue, and, other people were curious about it too. and their curiosity went with mine to sort of journey into figuring out how do we make this product without the preservatives.
Let me ask you this. Any business that's going to succeed takes more than the initial entrepreneur to do it. It takes a team of
Hmm.
talented people. How did you, making water in your kitchen essentially, convince anybody to join your company that you really wanted? What was your argument to sell them on the company?
Well, so I happen to have this other individual in my house, who was my husband, who was an intellectual property lawyer in Silicon Valley, and I needed to share with him two things. One, that I had this idea that I wanted to start this company that he had seen, that I had used, that I had basically gotten healthier by giving up my diet soda habit, and he had no idea that I was sort of quietly writing a business plan and kind of thinking about it while we had these three young children. But I decided when I needed to take $50,000 out of our bank account to go and buy bottles and caps and fruit and everything, that I really needed his, not his permission, but I should let him know so he didn't think I was going on a girls' trip to Jamaica or something, right? I mean, and so I said, his name is Theo. I said, Theo, you need to sit down and let me tell you what I'm going to do. And he wasn't arguing with me because I had made some money at AOL, my previous company, but he said, I don't think this is the greatest idea that you've ever come up with. I mean, it seems a little crazy because you don't have the experience, but when he heard why I ultimately wanted to do it, which was to not only help others get healthy, but also I had really seen that this was, a change that I had made in our house around diet sweeteners. And I thought, there's a lot of people in the world who ultimately need a product like this, but I need to put the money up front in order to do this. And when he kind of, poo-pooed the idea for the next few minutes, I thought that there was no better time than to share with him that I was pregnant with our fourth child. And so he said, wait, so you're doing a
So
company.
you sort of changed the conversation a bit.
I changed the conversation. He said, wait, so we're actually, you're doing a company that you have no experience in the industry, and you're pregnant with the fourth. And so we're going to have 4 kids under the age of 6. Now, you really think that's a great idea? And I said, I'm going to see a plant next week in Chicago, and I'm having some morning sickness. So it'd be really great if you came with me just in case. And that's when he really saw what a big idea this was, and how, he said, this is very interesting. And it's one definitely that we should, that I'd love to sort of help you out. He hadn't committed at that point, but 15 years later, he actually got his first business card on the day that we got the product on the shelf in Whole Foods, which was the day that I actually delivered our son Justin. And he went back the next day to refill the product that had sold out. And he said, I was dropping off the product with the merchandisers that were stocking the shelf. And they said, do you have a business card? And I realized that I don't have a business card. And so he went to FedEx Kinko's and got a business card. And he called me and he said, I think I'm going to be the chief operating officer of Hint Beverage. And I said, that sounds great. Whatever you want to do. I mean, again, like, we didn't think of it. It was like, I don't know. He was the only one that was operating. So why not be the chief, right? And he's still chief operating officer today.
And this is going to make a really tough case study at the Harvard Business School,
Well, it's interesting. It's actually, the book is in a class at Wharton already, so it'll be very interesting to see. But I do, it's an interesting point, because I think there are many complexities of this business. I mean, first of all, I had grown up in tech. I was a vice president of e-commerce and shopping partnerships at AOL, had a great career and a great run there. My husband was a Silicon Valley lawyer, we both really, really enjoyed what we were doing. But when we sort of fell into this, me first, and then he joined me, we just felt like we could really help a lot of people. And I think today, more than ever, that people are really challenged with, how to get healthy, right? It doesn't matter where you live, your gender, your socioeconomic background. It's like, it's really hard to get healthy, right? People go, spend millions of dollars on diets every year and, and trying everything, right? And I think so much of the time, it really boils down to, the things that they're putting into their body. And I mean, people know to exercise, right? They may not know exactly what type of exercise, but I think these diet and low fat products that are out there are just, really tricking people. I mean, you look at type 2 diabetes today, and the majority of people who have type 2 diabetes today claim to be eating and drinking a low fat, they just don't know how to happen to them. And I think that that's just, one point where it just goes to show you that these people are, consumers are trying, but it's just really, really challenging. And that was my story.
As you were developing the business, you probably had little voices in your head saying, "Can't be done, can't be done. You ought to give it up. Why even try?" How did you defeat those little voices that are inside every business person's head?
I think so, as time goes on, I think it's, look, the doubters and your own doubts are always going to be there. But I think that the key thing is remembering when you had doubts before and challenging times before, and you were able to kind of overcome those things and also make progress. And I do think that having a product that consumers love and buy, and having a mission driven company is something that is helpful, because you've got consumers sharing with you that they rely on you to get the best products. And I think like that's something that definitely helps you to overcome those challenging days. Also having a partner in the companies. I often tell people that when you're an individual entrepreneur and you're trying to launch something, it's very lonely, right? Especially when you're way ahead of where the rest of the consumers are. It's something that I think just, can't be, underrated in terms of how hard and challenging it is. So clearly between those two things, I think that that's a huge aspect.
Toughest thing you had to overcome, and how did you do it?
So many along the way, but it's I have to say, in writing this book, it was a lot of fun to go through, because it's always easier to look in the rear view mirror when you're in it. These challenging times, I think it's always a little bit challenging. I would say one of them was actually going back to an industry expert. A friend introduced me to somebody in the soda industry. And again, I talked a little earlier about these industry experts. And, I just assumed that just because they had years of experience and working in the soda industry, that they would be able to solve my problems around how to create a shelf-stable product and how to get distribution. And maybe they would even take the product. And that's when I had a phone call with a certain person in Atlanta at one of those big soda companies. And I expressed how excited I was that I had been getting traction in the Bay Area and some stores. This is about a year into our business. And was really, not sure sort of where this conversation was going to go. And he interrupted me and said, "Sweetie, Americans love sweet. This product isn't going anywhere." And I thought, wait a minute, he just called me sweetie? I'm like, hold on a minute. and I'm not even sure where I was for the next couple of minutes. And then I zeroed back in, and I you know, said, I basically listened for the next 10 minutes on why he believed that it was less important to really have an unsweetened product, and more important into getting consumers to believe that something was healthy. And I thought, wow, like I actually really want consumers to gain health. And this is somebody who's trying to convince consumers that their product is healthy, which is different. And so that's when I thought, gosh, we're two different vessels going down a river. His vessel has a lot more money than I do, but it's going to take a little while to turn it, right? It's more like a cruise ship. It's like the biggest cruise ship you've ever seen. I'm on a little, boat, has no money, has like one oar, right? And I thought, but they're just really, really different. And so that's when I thought, after 45 minutes on the phone, I thought, what I need to do is actually get another oar and start going. And that was the point when I said, if I don't do this, no one else will do this. Because I saw the vision so clearly, and I thought it's time, for me to really understand that nobody really has this type of experience for this product, because this product doesn't exist, and it's got a different mission than, we were 15 years ago. I was, as an individual, my friends looked at me and said, wait, what? Like, what's wrong with diet soda? And I'm like, gosh, I'd lost over 20 pounds in 2.5 weeks. I had cleared up my skin issues. I had gotten all this energy, and people were like, oh, you must be doing something else. I'm like, nope, that's it. I just, it was just the diet soda. Just got rid of the diet soda. It seems, like so common sense to people today, but 15 years ago, people really believed that diet and low fat and, some of these other products that were out there that were sort of claiming to be, healthy, more healthy perception products than healthy reality, were, okay. And I saw it way before many other people did.
Your company is now also selling sunblock. So you're expanding in a way. Where do you see your company and yourself 10 years down the road, let's say?
Well, I think for that was a natural extension. A lot of people have asked me, "Oh, did you always know you were going to start a extension, a brand extension?" I'm like, "No. We were really. I was at a point where I had gotten some basal cell cancer spots on my nose. I started developing some sunscreen in my house, which smelled better because we were using the essences that we use for the water, and we also eliminated oxybenzone. A friend of mine who used to work for L'Oreal had shared with me that all sunscreens need FDA approval. So I needed a name in order to fill out the paperwork. I figured I could change the name later on, but I'll just use that. It seemed fine to me. And that's when we ended up getting the approval after a year for that and launched it. And it's interesting because consumers, the response, we launched it online initially, and consumers who had been drinking Hint were like, of course you were launching, something else to help me stay healthier. And the response from the beverage industry was like, what's that crazy lady doing? She's launching like a sunscreen now, and that's not a beverage. That's a brand extension. And I thought, who am I actually trying to help here? I'm trying to help the consumer. And so since then, we've actually launched a deodorant recently that doesn't have aluminum in it, which, really stemmed from my father, who had Alzheimer's. I did a lot of research on aluminum and brain health. And while there's no cure for Alzheimer's, there's many doctors who suggest that it's not such a great idea, especially for brain health, to have too much aluminum going into your body, and certainly not underneath your arms. And most recently, during the pandemic, I decided that the choices for hand sanitizers was also quite limited. And so we just came out with a hand sanitizer. I'm holding up the grapefruit one right now that smells just like grapefruit. And it comes in lime and clementine as well. And you can get it on our website at drinkhint.com. But again, I feel like we've sort of paved our own way to ultimately making, better products for consumers. And really, it's a halo of health. That's ultimately what consumers find on our site and
Many,
in our brand.
Now, many entrepreneurs ultimately hit the speaking trail, although it's difficult to do with COVID these days. Do you see that in your future?
So I've been speaking a lot over the last couple of years on building my company, being a female entrepreneur, also just being an entrepreneur, taking on, a very crowded, very competitive industry. And so that ultimately is how I came up with the idea for writing this book. And, like I said earlier, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I guess I'm an accidental author as well, where I never thought of writing a book. And as I was out speaking and, hearing from people who had heard me speak, they would ask me questions. But in those questions at these events, they would also kind of make a statement about themselves, like, well, you're obviously very confident and you never had doubts, or, you never had any failures, things just went your way, or you never had any fears. And that's when I realized that I think that, that the truth really needs to be told, not only for, my journey, but also for other entrepreneurs' journeys, because I think so often we don't hear how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. We hear about the unicorns or the failures, or, and the journey, the climb, right? And the build, and what people ultimately take on in order to achieve. I've always appreciated the stories of so many entrepreneurs along the way, that I felt like it's almost even more interesting to know, like, how they got started, how they did it, or, how it ended. Instead, like, I just think, like, tell me some of those stories. Like, what were the hard lessons that you learned? What were the, scary times? Like, when did you fail? Like, what were your fears? Did you ever have any doubts? And so by telling my story, my hope is that other, would-be entrepreneurs, or maybe just people who are just interested and sort of understanding how people thought about things. I had a, person who wrote to me the other day who said, I have no aspirations to be an entrepreneur, but I loved your book because what it told me is that I can ultimately do things that I maybe had in my mind that I can't, because I don't have the right education, or, I haven't had the right experience. And what you've shared with me is that if I understand what I want and I have a focus, then I have to take steps in order to get there. And maybe you wake up halfway through taking all those steps and you realize, like, wow, I've actually come a long way. And you appreciate, who you are. And maybe you're a little more confident because you're like, I remember when I first started, when I tried to get my product on the shelf at Whole Foods, I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but it did. And people bought it. And then suddenly I'm like, I don't know, keep going. Maybe we go to another state. Maybe we go to another retailer. Maybe we try this. And it's kind of fun.
Tell our listeners and our viewers the name of the book again.
Undaunted: Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. And I am hopeful that everybody picks up a copy. It's a lot of fun. And it's definitely I think it's a book that, anybody, any age, any gender will appreciate.
And where can they get more information besides going to Whole Foods and buying some of your water to get more website perhaps?
Yeah, so Undaunted the book .com is one. Also my name, Kara Goldin with an I. You can go to karagoldin.com and also see a little bit more about me and also about the book too. And yeah, everyone said it's a very easy read. It's a read where, just as an example, John Legend, who's one of our investors, had said, when he was reading it, he kept thinking, okay, this is where she shuts the company down. And then he said, wait, she hasn't shut the company down. And, and he recognized all the, the points along the book that he didn't even know, right? The challenges. And he said, it was really enjoyable. I didn't want to put it down.
You have been very generous with your thoughts and all the information that you've provided, but what would you like to add that I haven't asked you?
I think I'm hopeful that people reading this will really think about, gosh, there's that idea that I've always thought that maybe I wanted to go do, and I didn't have the courage to go do it. And you go and try and take baby steps to go and make that happen. And don't put walls up in front of yourself that prevent you from ultimately getting out there and doing it.
You've been watching the Bizgnus podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. Thanks for watching.